So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the CEWP Water Platform Business Program webinar series, the first out of 4, which I have been looking very much forward to. You are going to see a number of very interesting presentations. We are going to have a very tight program, so my introduction will be very brief. First of all, I would like to thank the RAI Amsterdam for hosting this and taking us through the day in a very good manner. I will share my screen with you now and will just say a few words about what I see as the context of today's meeting. Hopefully the screen is up here today. We're going to discuss about urban water. And urban water is a topic which is extremely relevant. It's relevant in China, where we see a still urbanization with expectation for increasing ratio in the newest 5-year plan, but also in Europe, with the difference being that, put it in a bit simple manner, that in Europe it's a matter of retrofitting old urban areas, while in China it's very new urban areas. However, there are a range of characteristics which are shared. And the one thing is that whether the water comes from rivers, flooding, or it's cloudburst, it flows despite what our urban setting is. It doesn't care whether it's old or new buildings. It doesn't care whether it's suburbs or financial districts. It floats as water do. Another detail is that that flooding will impact the water quality aspects, and we will have to look into pollution remediation or maybe ignore it. That's a decision, but it's a fact. The third thing is water don't respect administrative boundaries. It comes from the entire catchment. It goes across provinces, district, or city boundaries. And finally, an important detail is whether it's in new or old settings, you still have the very difficult choice of getting the risk level right. Should it be 10-year events, 50, 100, 500, or even 1,000-year events you will have to deal with? We will come through a number of presentations. We will end up with a roundtable and some of the questions for discussion. Some of the questions for discussion are quite simple. Do we have solutions which are sufficient on all parameters to deal with the challenges we're facing and to cover the benefits which are also part of the coin? What do we do to cover all related water management challenges? And here again, I'm thinking about how dealing with flooding matters will eventually also have a huge water quality aspect. What to do with having solutions which can be scaled up, where it's not a matter of projects and special efforts, but something which is handled in a manner where all cities eventually, because most cities are subject to flood risk, that all cities will take this on board in an operational manner. Not even only the largest million inhabitants people, but also when we get to tier 4, 5, 6, whatever. And when it comes to financing, how to find mechanisms for this, which is not just based on grants and government budgets, but which is somehow a more organic way of financing and economics. And that brings me to the last question: how to ensure the long-term horizon and how to include true cost of ownership. All of that is a matter of which solutions we have at hand, how the market works, and hereby how the framework conditions set up and the official targets set up are supporting the functioning of the market. A final comment from my side before I will pass on the floor to the first speaker, Løkke Leonardsen, is those of you who have not registered yet, please do that because it will allow for me afterwards to send you questionnaires for feedback. How did this webinar function? But it's also a matter of that if we do set up additional events on top of what we have already advertised, you're also able to take part of that. So please fill in the registration during or after the webinar. With this, I will stop sharing my screen. I will hope you will have an excellent webinar. I really hope you will stay with us the entire day. And I will hereby pass on the word to Løkke Leonardsen from the organization C40. Løkke, please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Henrik, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. I will try to share my screen. There we go. Let's see if I can get it up as a slideshow. There we are. Thank you so much. And I just want to say, Henrik presented me as from C40, but I'm also from the city of Copenhagen. I actually split my time between the two organizations, working on a project in C40 that's called Water Safe Cities. But as Henrik mentioned, cities are the ones actually feeling the true impact of climate change. We have growing urbanization, we have an increased density in cities, and many cities are located in areas with a high risk for flooding. And I'll show you a few illustrations of what the future for cities will be. It's taken from the C40 report, The Future We Don't Want. So if you look at the urban areas now in the 2000s and what it'll look like in the 2050s, you can see the growing urbanization and how we actually see more mega cities all around the world. But you also see that a lot of these cities are at extreme risk for growing heat in the city. That is a challenge to many. There's also a risk in many cities for water availability, actually not having sufficient amounts of drinking water. And a lot of cities are also at risk for coastal flooding. And in the project I'm working on at the moment, we are also looking at the risk of inland flooding, but I don't have any illustrations of that as yet. But it is also a problem that many cities will face in the future. So cities need a joint voice to raise these issues on a global scale. And C40 or ICLAI can be that voice. I mean, there are lots of climate negotiations and finance issues taken at UN level or at national level. But it's the cities that actually have to implement the solutions, and they're the ones with a direct responsibility towards the citizens and the safety and economic situation of their citizens. So an organization like C40, we are working at two levels. We have the global policy levels, looking and trying to raise the voice of cities on a global scale. What are the climate change related challenges that cities are facing? What needs to be done in order to assist cities in overcoming this issue? But we are also working at the local city level on accelerating adaptation in cities and assisting cities in developing solutions. And one of those examples is actually the Water Safe Cities project that I'm working on, where we are offering assistance to a number of C40 cities on water-related climate change challenges. Because a lot of cities are facing the same issues, and we do not all need to invent the wheel. We can learn from each other. And that's why an organization like C40 plays a major role in accelerating climate change adaptation on the city level, simply by sharing solutions. Solutions that fit in Copenhagen might also fit cities in China or cities in India if they are adapted to the local level where they are going to be implemented. Because and another thing that an organization like C40 can also assist on is overcoming barriers. As Henrik mentioned in his introduction, adaptation has to take place at a local regional level. We need data. We have financing and insurance being an issue, and we need a lot of innovation to move forward. And if you look at it from the top, saying local versus national level, there's no such thing as administrational boundaries when it comes to climate change. Water flows where it wants to flow, heat spreads where it spreads, and it doesn't have anything to do whether you are in one municipality or another. So local problems very often call for at least a regional solution, maybe even a national one. And we have national and regional legislation and regulations that have a huge impact on what can actually be done at the local level. So there needs to be a coordination between these national, regional, and local level in order to give the cities the right means to attack and solve these problems. We also need data, because without data, we cannot, we run the risk of maladaptation, actually spending money on the wrong things in the wrong way. There's a lot of global data on climate change, but they're not very useful on the local level. So we need to downscale on local level. And for many cities, that's an issue because it takes a lot of resources in order to get to that point. So there's also a need for local modeling, especially when it comes to water solution. And here the level of detail has a huge impact. To give you an example from Copenhagen, when we went from using a 1 meter by 1 meter grid, down to a 20 by 20 centimeter grid, we also reduced the costs of implementation on a major scale. We also need data to assess the environmental impact, because discharging stormwater into parks and rivers and lakes also can have an environmental impact that is not desirable. We need to look at what's sometimes called cost-benefit analysis, but I like to turn the picture around, saying it's benefit-cost analysis. We have to look at the estimated damages. We have to calculate that, and we need data in order to do that. And once we have actually implemented some of our systems, we need to monitor their efficiency. Do they actually work as supposed to? And we also need to monitor if they have the desired environmental impact, so that we can be sure that we're not doing more damage. Financing is a challenge, as Henrik also mentioned. There are lots of different models that go beyond just external funding through international aid. It can be on water fees, it can be on taxes, but it can also be in green bonds that many cities are using these days. An issue that's not often mentioned is actually insurance, because in many cities, large groups do not have any insurance, and therefore it's really important to look at how insurance companies can actually also be a stakeholder in this work in the future. And since we are developing something that, or adapting to something that we do not know, there's a huge need for innovation. We need new solutions, we need new technologies, some simple, some very advanced. We need to be able to monitor water quality, and we need to be able to monitor the effect of our measures. And this all calls for an increased digitalization of the water sector on a global scale, but also on a local scale. And adaptation is not the only aim. We are struggling in cities with many other issues: poverty, equity, loss of biodiversity, air quality, congestion, lack of affordable housing. And actually, a lot of cities are looking at how to fix these problems along with their adaptation challenges. And from Copenhagen, we can say we have looked very much into this in our cloudburst management plan on how we can actually have more co-benefits of adaptation. And I think this is something that a lot of cities are doing these days. So what we are looking at in the future is what I call transformative adaptation. And it's a type of adaptation where you're not just looking at solving the climate change adaptation issue, but actually transforming the city, contributing to other goals. That could be on greenhouse gas emissions, social equity and biodiversity, the environment, mobility, and housing. But it needs a strong focus and a lot of coordination in the planning and implementation phase. We have tried doing that on our cloud-based management plan in Copenhagen. I will not go through this, just show that over a 4-year period, we developed and went from just having the first plan into actual implementation. And we are dealing with 2 main risks, and in this plan, focusing on one, that is the risk of heavy rains, heavy cloudbursts, but we also in the future looking towards rising sea levels being a risk. Our cloudburst plan has 300 surface projects, and it will transform the city completely over the next 20-year period, and is also the backbone of a lot of our urban development in the city. And it's not just the future for us. We had a huge cloudburst in 2011 that cost us an awful lot of money, $1 billion in damages, but it also gave an image of how the future can be, and it underlined the need for action here and now. And these, at the end, I'll just show you a few examples of projects that we have implemented. This is St. Kjell Square, where we have doubled the permeable surface, planted 600 trees, and it's all of a sudden become a green living area in the city of Copenhagen. Skandiagade, and a park where we will use the entire park as a flooding area to hold back stormwater in case of heavy rains. And Remediation, also a project. And all of these are actually in areas where there are also social issues, so they're also helping improve the local neighborhood. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Løkke, for this comprehensive, fast-forward covering of the climate change adaptation globally and in Copenhagen. While we're waiting for Chen Lichun to be ready to give her presentation, just one question, Løkke. You're ready, Chen? Excellent. Løkke, C40 in China. How many members of the C40 have in China?
Oh, I don't have the exact number, but there's a growing number of C40 cities in China. I know, I mean, we've got the major cities like Guangzhou, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Beijing, Shanghai, but I can check it up, so I have it, I can post it in the chat later.
Exactly. Chen Lichun, thank you very much for attending, and please take the floor with your presentation.
好的，各位欧洲的朋友，早上好，各位那个中国的朋友，那个下午好。然后呢，我就代表我们那个综合水平台水域城镇化重点研究领域呢，做一个简单的汇报。那么从原来我们就是PAD项目来看呢，就整个项目呢是分为9个工作包。那么整个工作包呢，就其实比较强调的是那个综合水平台海绵城市建设项目与水平台的互动。那么其实我们在实际的推进的过程中呢，其实也是这么推进的。那么具体表现为，其实在中国院，第一个是作为综合水资源平台的联合指导委员会的成员，在2020年5月份呢，参加了平台指导委员会的会议，6月份呢参与了那个旗舰项目提案的起草工作。那么在水和城镇化的重点领域的PAD综合水平台合作项目，由中国城市规划院、北京市水务局以及与荷兰、瑞典、丹麦、荷兰机构共同合作，以北京市、常德市为中方试点城市，共同开展海绵城市建设领域的合作与技术交流。那么为了更好的同步推进这个平台的工作与PAD项目的那个推进呢，中国院于2020年初派了那个3位专家前往荷兰开展为期3个月的学习和交流。但是后来受这个全球性的疫情的影响呢，工作内容压缩了两个月就是完成。回国后呢，继续工作，同时改为线下的工作模式。那么在2020年呢，中俄双方共同组织了3次线上的项目推进会议，通过线上的会议讨论、线上的协同工作等多种方式，保障了PAD项目的稳步推进。 那么总体而言呢，我们那个在全球大疫情的背景下呢，就创新了工作的形式，保障PaaS项目的稳步的推进。那么我们可以看到，在2020年七次的那个项目工作列表已经按计划全部完成。这样通过这样的话，就在由线下改为线上了，全面的那个保证了这个PaaS项目的工作推进。那么通过我们的推进呢，也取得了比较好的成果，基本达到预期的要求。那么在2个试点城市，以北京为例的，北京的那个试点工作是以北京市沙河水库。那么该项目的那个场地面积呢是1.8平方公里。那么研究的总体目标呢是削减河流质管网溢流的污染。那么当时和PaaS项目共同确定了它的工作内容，包括河流质溢流污染排口的梳理，河流质溢流污染排口水质的分析，污染物模型的分析，以及多方面海绵措施的效果分析。通过研究呢，结果表明，就是我们已经治理了80%的溢流排口，对 SS 和 COD 的去除率分别可达到50%以上和25%以上。然后呢，就是中俄研究人员共同发表了相关的会议论文。那么在另外一个试点城市常德，是以气象局为案例。那么该项目的场地面积是1.33公顷，那么进行了海绵城市的改造。那么它的改造内容包括可透水面、雨水花园、植草沟、雨水收集利用。那么在PaaS的框架下呢，是推进那个如下几方面的工作。一个呢是可持续发展工具适应性的分析，第二一个呢是决策知识工具适应性的分析，第三一个是成本效益工具的适应性分析，以及海绵城市建设效果评估对比研究。那么通过那个示范应用呢，取得了比较好的成果，包括完成了工具适应性的完成了分析工具适应性开发以及初步应用，完成了不同情景下海绵设施的可持续性评估。那么还有呢，就是交流了中国海绵城市建设效果的评估经验。当然，就是另外呢，就是中国院作为住建部的那个直属事业单位，那么承担了全国的海绵城市评估。那么在评估的过程中呢，也是应用了相关的研究成果。那么在2020年的3月份到12月份，中国城市规划院呢组织了北建大、中国水协、上海市政医院等团队近100余人开展了那个33个城市的调研，然后呢，到2020年12月底，已经全面的形成了一个全国性的总报告，31个省市区的综合报告，那么33个典型城市的综合评价报告，以及一个全国通报函，31个省市区的通报函。那么通过把中俄水平台合作的经验呢，就是纳入到这个全国海绵城市评估的这个工作中来，有效的推进了全国海绵城市建设的持续性推进。另外一个重要的成果就是“1045”的那个水系统的规划研究。其实我们刚才在上一位演讲者里面就看到那个片子，那么在中国在“1045”规划中要提到城镇化率要达到65%。那么作为中国城市规划院呢，就支持住建部开展了就是说城市水系统相关的规划研究，就是说从水系统的保障这一块怎么来支持这个城镇化率达到65%。这里面从排水防涝、海绵城市、黑臭水体治理、污水提质增效等各方面，就是提出了相关的那个规划的研究。那么另外一个成果呢，是中俄城市与城市间的学习。那么通过研究，其实我们也可以看得到，其实中国和欧洲呢有相似的地方，也有一定的区别的地方。那么欧洲呢，其实整体而言，它的城市化水平呢相对比较高，那么它也是可持续理念的发源之地。那么到现在这个阶段呢，它其实 海绵城市，不管还是韧性城市，它是以低影响开发建设，以社区尺度为主，技术的工具的开发相对比较成熟。那么中国呢，其实生态文明建设理念的政策引领呢，这几年也是非常的大力的推进，包括现在的低碳达峰的要求。那么海绵城市呢，其实目前呢是以流域汇总分区为主。那么技术工具呢，其实目前还从某种意义上来讲呢，还是有一定的借鉴为主。那么其实基于中国、欧洲的相互学习呢，我们已经提出了相关政策的报告，而且根据中欧这个技术工具的需求分析的提出了技术工具的优先发展的方向。那么就是对于下一阶段呢，就是说这个项目怎么推进，我们着重从4方面推进。第一个呢是配合俄方推进工作包的进展。第二一个呢就是说我们还是希望在平台上面呢参与互动，通过平台与项目的共同推进来推进项目的研究。第三个方面就是完善相关的保障机制，那么继续的推进中欧水资源交流平台旗舰项目的立项。这个工作呢，目前在我们院也是目前已经有比较好的进展。那么第4一个方面就是说，也是加强海绵城市建设的宣传和推广。这个其实也是和中国下一阶段要“十四五”重点工作是相互吻合的。那么在“十四五”住建部有一项比较重要的工作，一个是防洪爬道的工作的建设，第二个是全域化的推进海绵城市建设。那么整个这样的话呢，就是我们的工作也是和住建部的重点工作是相对应的，就是也和刚才我们前一位演讲者所提到的，就是说城市的内涝治理也是相呼应的。那么整体我就汇报这么多，然后呢请大家指正与讨论吧。
Thank you very much, Chendi Chun. Could you venture to say what do you see as the 3 largest challenges? What are the 3 main challenges for the sponge city concept to be further implemented in China?
我想这里面可能从目前来看呢，就是说，海绵城市建设，我想目前已经形成了一种共同的理念。住建部呢，在“十四五”呢会推进全域化的推进。我想这里面可能，你说要有挑战的话，可能一方面是海绵城市就是各个城市适合的技术路线。比方说，我什么样的城市采用什么样的技术路线，这是第一个。第二一个呢，就是说海绵城市建设的资金的问题，我想这可能是第二个问题，资金从哪里来，怎么花的问题。毕竟这个事呢，就是海绵城市如果真的是建设下去，还是要比较大投资的。我想可能这2个问题是比较核心的问题吧。至于第3个，目前我还没想好。
No, but these are also very, very important challenges, and the ones we will be coming back to in the roundtable. The first one, that cities have different challenges, also means we have to have solutions which can be applied under different circumstances. And the second one about the financing and getting the source of the finances. How do we eventually translate all the costs from damages into becoming also money which can be raised on the investment side on preventing the damage? We will come back to that in the roundtable. Thank you very much, Chendi Chun. We will move on now to the first company presentation, which is Mads Terkelsen from Rambøll of Denmark. Mads, please take the floor.
Thank you. I'll just prepare. Okay. Thank you very much, Henrik. Yes, I'm from Rambøll. Rambøll is a large international consulting engineering company. We are more than 16,000 colleagues around the world. We are present in more than 35 countries, and in China we have 4 offices, and I think we are now a couple of hundred employees, and we are growing. Our typical the topics that we work with the classical engineering topics like buildings, transport, energy, environment, water, planning, and urban design. And then we also have management consulting. And we try always to combine, when we start a task, we always try to combine all the different expertises into holistic and integrated solutions. And that was how we were sort of entering this urban blue-green market, so to say. And we started to combine every time we had a project, either wastewater, water, flooding, landscape architecture. We tried to combine all the different topics into these projects. We started out in Denmark, and then from Denmark we took and Denmark and some other international projects as well. We were, by the help and support by China-Europe Water Platform and also the Sino-Danish bilateral cooperation, we were able to bring our projects and products, so to say, to China, and then working with the Chinese, who are very innovative and introduced, for example, the sponge city concept. We were able actually to increase our market share internationally after being in China. We are still in China and we're growing in China, but we are growing because of the projects in China. We are growing very much in the rest of the world as well. And that's all. That actually comes down to a lot to the China-Europe Water Platform, because when we move out to the market in China, when we moved out, they were already informed on the basics on the concepts, so we didn't have to start from scratch. They had quite a lot of knowledge when we talked to the stakeholders, so we could target the real, quite fast target the real issues and problems. This is a project that one out of many projects that we sort of did at home, so to say. This is from Copenhagen. It's originally a climate change flooding project, but we added a lot of other values to the area, such as the recreational space and blue-green better microclimate and so on from the green area. And I said also, we also, of course, worked abroad, and I just have one example from abroad, because this is very, Copenhagen is not relevant maybe for Beijing, but this project is more relevant because this is, we applied some of our technologies from our Danish project into a large project in Singapore, which actually is very similar to how we see things in China as well. This project is, it was a park with a flooding canal in the middle, and the water in the canal, that's a lower picture, was black odor water. So what we did was we removed the canal and made a little bit larger depression, so the capacity of handling flood water was increased, and at the same time we applied natural wetland systems and root zone treatment systems, so we could maintain high water quality so that people could actually use the water. We installed mobility things and activities and and created this area space that actually increased the value for the neighborhood immensely, and also the prices of the houses around went up. And then this just one example from China that we did. This is based, among other things, from the contacts we got through China Water Platform and the Sino-Danish cooperation, and also being able to present, especially the case that I just showed you from Singapore. This is a cultural park in Tianjin. The thing here is that they wanted a park that was sort of not in risk of flooding, because there has been flooding events in Tianjin, so it's a it's a known risk in the area. Excuse me. So we made this park, including a lake and some green areas, also some mobility paths for lights, like for pedestrians, and maybe some bikes as well. And we made it so that it could take care of the flooding, but also served a lot of other purposes, including recreational areas and transport. This is an example from 2012, where the rest of Beijing, Tianjin looked like this, but in the park area it looked like this, and this sort of proof of concepts, and it's not even reached the maximum level yet, and it's not nearly reaching the construction and the houses around. Working with China put on some extra layers, because Chinese authorities and the government is very innovative in their approach to solving problems, and that we really benefited from that. We of course we work with water quality, water scarcity, flooding, urban design, landscape architecture, recreational areas, mobility, activities, local microclimate, all values. And then we really benefited from the sponge city concept as well, which is actually more or less the same, but in a more clear. It's a good way of explaining it. And that we brought further on out in internationally. And this next project has nothing to do with China. It's a total different setting. It's from a poor country in Western Africa. But the reason why I bring it is this is what we work with. We started December 22 last year. So we are working on this now, and this is exactly the same kind of projects. It's a drain. It's a drain that that sort of fills up with waste and blocks, so it doesn't work as a flooding canal. So we change it, and we use all these different expertises and combine them into this solution. So we actually make a blue-green area in this poor area. We're not moving people away from the area. We're not touching their house or anything, but we have this strip along the drain where we can make this blue-green area, create shades, create better microclimates. We can they have livestock there. We can make sure that they get water, and the way they get it is that we use the wastewater we clean the wastewater in natural systems, root zone systems, and then we use for watering, etc. So these were my words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mads. Very interesting to hear that that the experiences can be taken further. It really points to the various types of networks and in experience sharing is really important and working. Without further ado, I will pass on the floor to Frederick from Sweco, and we'll move from up to Stockholm. And
yes.
Frederick, you are ready to take us for your 8-minute presentation. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. My name is Fredrik Ols, and I'm working as a city planner, and I'm an expert in blue-green solutions. I'm working mainly in Stockholm, but the last 2 years I've also been working in China. And the last years I've also more and more been focusing on the detailed design of these blue-green systems, and also thinking how and why do we, what will bring us these blue-green systems everywhere. And my advice to you all is, if you make it simple, it will happen. And that means if a regulation is, the legislation is simple, you will have, every stakeholder will know yes, we need to do the blue-green solution when we construct something. And I will try to explain what I mean. And the title is How the Mandatory Level of 20 millimeter for Everyone is Changing Stockholm. So I will start with a statement, not so humble maybe. I have an advice to Chinese regulation. I think you should set the city value of each city, because every city is different according to the rain patterns. You set the city value of daily rain that you must infiltrate or maybe lead to a pond in millimeter. Stockholm, we have 20 millimeter, and some of our suburbs, they have 10 millimeter. It's very easy for everyone to understand. And when it's easy, it will happen. And the reason for this millimeter is that runoff is the same as pollution. Most of you know that. And this is the Stockholm precipitation, one normal year, from January to December. And I forgot to tell you, I'm sitting in a farm of green roof.
Frederick?
Yeah?
We can't see your presentation. So you,
Oh,
have
really?
to you have to share your screen.
Uh-huh. But you say something, some pictures?
No.
Oh, really? Can you see now?
No, I can do your presentation, but then you have to say, move to the next slide, please.
Oh, okay, let's see now.
Yes,
Yeah.
there it is.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay. Good luck.
It's not a problem. This I've already told you about. You make it simple. And runoff is pollution, you remember? And this is Stockholm daily precipitation, one normal year. And you see my screen now?
Yes, we
Good,
see your screen.
good. Perfect. January to December. And 20 millimeter, it's 90% of the annual runoff volume in Stockholm. And this is unique for every city. So you just calculate that for your city. And then you will know that this is a coincidence, but this is 90% of the annual pollutants in Stockholm, if you infiltrate it. You can also choose 10 to have 10 millimeter in Stockholm will be 80% of the annual pollutants. And then we implement it into blue-green infiltration that will bring us even cleaner water in the future when our city is growing very fast. Okay, not so fast as in China, but one of the fastest growing cities in Europe. So this is, then we have the level of action, we call it, for stormwater. And everybody know it. Every private property owner, the municipality, every actor in the building process in Stockholm. So here we have some examples. This is that after this level of action. You know, as a private property owner, you know you need to take care of 20 millimeters. So then you get a lot of green roofs, you get a lot of green courtyards, looking like this. And like this. And since I didn't have the time to go to the green roof, I chose another nice city, Malmö in South Sweden, to show you how it looks like, because here I was at having the opportunity to take the photo from above. But this is basically how it looks like now, also in Stockholm. And this is also one example from China where you can store all your 90% of the pollutants. This is in a field trip I made in Shenzhen last year. So it's beautiful and it's easy. And this is not only for the property owners, it's also for the municipality or the payment. You know, you need to take care of 20 millimeter of rain. So you take the 20 millimeter times the hard top and maybe a little reduction factor. And then you store it in rain gardens, trees, in structural soils and dry ponds. And this level of action 20 millimeter is now making a revolution to Stockholm, because you need to do these kind of local decentralized solutions everywhere. So my advice then is to calculate the millimeter value. It's something about 10 to 25 millimeter. Stick to it, advertise, implement, and follow up. And I know in China you have annual total runoff control rate, but as far as I see it, it's too complicated for us consultants. When we come to a new project, we don't know what is the limit. Just give us a millimeter and we will make it blue-green. Thank you. And that was everything from my presentation.
Thank you very much, Fredrik. Thanks a lot for your presentation. And if I got your proposal right, it is it's an obligation for every household or every landowner or everybody who has an area to take care of.
Yes, it's when you have a new construction or a pretty large reconstruction, you must do this, and this is a revolution in making a revolution to our city.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now move on to the next speaker. Jeroen, are you ready to take the floor? Yes, I can see you there. While we are about to pass the word to Jeroen, please make use of the chat, ask questions, put comments, get in touch with some of the other ones. Please, Jeroen, floor is yours.
Thank you, Henrik. And I believe that you can see my screen at this moment.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Henrik, if you can let me know when I have 1 minute left of my 8 minutes, then I will stay on schedule.
Sure.
So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeroen Rijsdijk. I work at Arcadis, a global design and consultancy firm with a presence in over 40 countries, active in 70 countries, and also very active in China. I've been in China myself 12 times in the past 5 years, and most of my time I spent in the city of Wuhan. So Arcadis has a big presence, and we have also our mission statement, and that is about improving the quality of life. And we've been working on that since 1888, and a lot of other companies joined Arcadis in the last decades. So we've become a big global firm working on all sorts of nice projects. And one of those nice projects I want to elaborate a little bit on is the project that we did in Wuhan for a local project developer which was developing the Hanco Commercial International Business District, also known as RG27. And this area of approximately 3 square kilometers had a really high ambition about developing. Here you see some images from the architects, and they had a really high ambition, but they also had a lot of difficulties that they had to address. They were situated at the waterfront of the Yangtze River. It was a flat area, low soil infiltration possibilities, also in intense underground buildings, and yeah, very hard conditions for the Spawn City program. So we helped this project developer in making a couple of plans to implement the Spawn City ideas into this development. And what we did, we made a Spawn City master planning, a Spawn City general planning. We made a specialized planning, a design guideline, and we also did some assessments on projects that were already designed. And the idea of this was to help the designers, the local architects, the landscapers, how to translate all these Spawn City ideas towards a Spawn City design. And we also added something extra. And that extra was that we looked beyond Spawn City criteria and looked at how to make the area also climate resilient, because Spawn City only sets targets for a certain amount of water capture. And it always will rain more extreme than that at some point. So what do you do if you build your Spawn City area and the event that is occurring is more extreme than your Spawn City criteria? So we looked at introducing resiliency, and the need for the resiliency can be seen at the right side, where you see all the blue and red dots, because those dots all represent entries to the underground, meaning tunnels, subway entrances, but also underground parking garages. So that means that if you have an extreme event that will succeed the Spawn City amount of capture, then all these underground openings will provide water running into underground parking garages, underground parking shopping malls, tunnels, traffic facilities. And yeah, that really made the urgency to look beyond Spawn City. So what we did in the planning, we helped, of course, to translate Spawn City criteria from the master planning to the specialized planning to a Spawn City design guide. And here you can see the flow that we were following. But we also introduced the resiliency system. And with the resiliency system, we looked at totally different types of measures of how to make the area climate resilient for the really extreme events. And of course, these really extreme events happen in Wuhan just as they happen in other cities. So it also says being resilient doesn't mean that there will be no more flooding, but it stands for the ability to minimize the damage and maximize the efficiency of recovery. So that's really the idea that we implemented. And of course, in China, you have to defend your reports that you make to an expert board, to an expert panel. And the experts from the universities and from Beijing, they really understood, okay, yes, you have to do this as well on top of Spawn City. So what we did in implementing all these reports and this way of working, we also did some cost benefits analysis on the performance of different types of measures, helping to make it more clear for the local design group how to make their designs. And of course, from the resiliency part that is very well known and very active in the Netherlands, we help them how to look at their designs to implement this extra resiliency. And of course, it was needed because 80% of the underground is built construction, meaning that the surface that you see is almost everywhere on top of an underground construction. So that really makes it difficult to make the area very resilient. And the last part, yeah, 1 minute. Okay, thank you. And the last part was that we also made the hydraulic simulations to help the design groups to make the right decisions. And here's an area where we looked at the Central Park, and in the Central Park, we helped to translate again all these criteria into the design criteria and helping them with the self-assessment and the government assessment. So this was really a nice adventure in helping the local design group, the local project developer, in implementing this ambitious planning. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. What I heard you say was that if the official sponge city criteria had been followed, then the damages of a huge cloudburst or flood event would have been quite severe. Is that correct?
Yes, of course, because the sponge city criteria only captures a relatively small amount of rainfall. And if you look at an extreme event that would occur maybe once in every 100 years or 200 or 500 years, those events are occurring at this moment, then the sponge city low impact development designs, they will not be sufficient to prevent extreme damage and extreme disturbance of traffic and people. So that is what we introduced. Look also beyond the sponge city criteria, look at the resiliency of how you design the streets and how you design the buildings.
I'll give you one more question because you'll not be able to take part of the roundtable. The fact that you go beyond the official criteria, have that had any impact on the possibilities of financing the extra measures?
I'm not really involved in the actual realization at this moment. A lot of this project has been built at this moment. So I reckon that it was able that they implemented the ideas of the resiliency, and the fact that it's there meant that they also found their finance. But yeah, you have to be really creative to find your finance, and yeah, that's probably the challenge in all cities for all developers, and not only in China but all over the world at this moment.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. Have a good day. We will now move on to the next presentation, which is Frans van de Veen. And Frans, I can see from your video that you are already with us. Take it away.
Thank you, Henrik. Well, I think my presentation is going to match very well Frederick's and Jeroen's presentation he gave. Let me share my screen for the moment. I start sharing. Well, I hope to speak a little bit about how to support that blue-green sponge city planning that we are thinking about in this webinar. My name is Frans van der Ven. I'm working with an institute called Delta.
Frans?
Yes.
Excuse me, we don't see your screen.
Really? Because I see. That is strange. Let me try to share again, because this is what I'm sharing my screen now. It says on the machine, but okay.
Yes, yes, there it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't move anything, but as far as I can see, it's on presentation mode now. Huh? I'm sorry. Sorry for this disturbance. I'm working with the institute called Deltaris, an independent institute for applied research in the field of water subsurface, and then, of course, focusing a lot on the Netherlands and with a lot of Dutch expertise, but working worldwide, and currently planning to open an office in China, but due to the Corona crisis, that has been delayed substantially. Coming back to the sponge city approach, well, the sponge city approach addresses the problem of urban water management from 5 perspectives: safety, culture, resources, environment, and ecology. And well, as was mentioned before, it sets all sorts of criteria and indicators for having a decent sponge city, including that famous indicator called VCRA, the volume capture ratio, as we all know. But what we did in the past is we started comparing this approach, the sponge city approach, with 2 approaches, one from, say, Australia, New Zealand, the water sensitive city planning approach, and, say, the Dutch climate resilient city planning approach. As a result, we found, say, substantial differences in principles. For example, the Dutch never shift problems approach principle was not applied in the sponge city. Another big thing was to bring the relevant stakeholders around the table. So the co-creation of planning is an important issue, and design for resilience, as Jeroen said already. That is another issue. But to do so, we had to strengthen a couple of issues in the sponge city approach. That is the flood hazard assessment, the storage capacity assessment, the drought mitigation assessment, and the groundwater system analysis. And basically, that's what we did in a couple of projects, as we will see in the next steps. We defined a new approach to planning and design to get more co-creation, co-design into the process. But moreover, we started working on tools that could help us to define that sponge city capacity and to help us select the best measures to come to co-creation. If it comes to designing the standards, and in line with what Frederick said, we have to retain and store the water rather than drain the water. And we developed a process on designing the size of the sponge in a better way. And we did that using the so-called water balance model. And with that water balance model, we were able to define storage discharge frequency curves. And in these curves, you can see the relationship between the discharge capacity that is acceptable for downstream, the downstream river part, which is limited, of course, because we cannot discharge infinitely unless we would like to flood our downstream neighbors, and the required storage capacity, whether that is 20 millimeter or 60 millimeter like they use in Amsterdam, or, well, that of course depends a lot on the local climate. So we have to define this capacity for every city separately, and that's what we did basically for, well, this is an example from Nanjing, but we did similar studies for Qinghai and other cities in China. Then the next step is, once you have defined these values, you can start co-design. You have to bring all the experts, the related experts together in one room, and you need a tool to support that planning process, to co-design that planning process. And that is what we made with the Climate Resilient City Toolbox. The first version was made for Xiantan under contract for the Asian Development Bank. And basically, the tool helps to support ecosystem-based adaptation using these blue-green solutions as we try to plan these in the urban environment. Once you enter the tool, you will find a lot of different blue-green solutions you can choose from, and you can apply these solutions in a planning way in the toolbox. You can find additional information on each of these measures. It's all available in Chinese and in English if you like, but it's also available in Chinese. And what the toolbox does, it gives you estimates of the performance. It gives you estimates of the storage capacity that is realized, that 20 millimeters that Frederick was about, or the 60 millimeters or whatever, a return time factor, the groundwater recharge, but also indicators on water quality improvements, the suspended sediment reduction, nutrient reduction, etc., and a first estimate on costs of construction and of maintenance. All first estimates, because we are still in a very conceptual phase of design, but it gives you the opportunity to with the team to draft alternatives and to compare alternatives. And that is how we, for example, made this plan for a new to build Chinese medicine hospital in Shantan. The design of the buildings were made, but the layout of the terrain, the campus around it, we implemented a lot of blue-green solutions there in order to create sufficient retention capacity there. Well, a similar analysis was done for the Qinghai district in Nanjing, where there was a priority list of interventions defined as a first step. And with the toolbox, we were able to find out which measures could be implemented where in the area. And we could define sort of a priority list of interventions to see what can be done in each of these ways. Which brings me to the conclusion of my presentation, and that is, well, first of all, the conclusion is that Blue-Green Cities development is a complex learning process for all of us. It's learning. It is city-to-city learning. It's expert-to-city learning, and so on. It requires a comprehensive approach to the urban water management system, including groundwater, including space, including water quality, including health, etc., etc. And it includes water governance. Henrik already spoke about the financing. Well, I think it's more than the financing. It's also the policies, it's the regulations, it's the capacity building in the city, and so on. But if you want to achieve these multi-factor benefits that we all are convinced of that blue-green solutions can bring, we need, first of all, to plan for multifunctional use. But that multifunctional use also requires multi-stakeholder planning. All stakeholders, all experts are to be involved in the planning process. And supporting tools like the Climate Resilient City tool are needed to support such a planning process, or that urban water balance model to define how much sponge capacity you need. Then the multifunctional design requires lots of data and requires data sharing. And data sharing is indeed something that is something that is very touchy subject in China. And I think there's some improvements to be achieved in the near future. And last but not least, coming back to that complex learning process, I think training and education helps to change the siloed culture of these organizations. And I think that we in the Chinese-European cooperation are particularly suited to provide that training and education component as a part of the whole innovation process that we are going through at this very moment. But if you want to read more about the toolbox, I included a literature list of published peer-reviewed articles on this stuff. And for the moment, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Franz, for this tour de force through your toolbox. We'll come back to some of the topics you have mentioned with multi-stakeholder involvement, co-creation, and siloed organizations, and so on, when we get to the roundtable. Now we will move on to our next speaker, which is Simone Paduan, who will take us particularly to a case in Venezia, as far as I recall. Simone, take it away.
Thank you, Henrik. Yes, of course. Today I'm going to talk about a specific topic that is related to what we can do in planning a new development of a very contaminated site inside the urban area with a specific and very delicate environment in the water. And usually, you should see my presentation. Venice is famous for the cultural heritage of the city on the water, and it is famous mostly for its tourism. Venice, the ancient city of Venice, inside a lagoon. You can see the ancient city right in the middle of the lagoon in the green circle. But very little people know that here in this area, in the red circle, we have a very huge industrial park. It is on the mainland, on the borderline between the mainland and the lagoon. And this park has been built in 2019, and it was actually very developed after the Second World War. And at the end of the 70s, it was one of the largest petrochemical area in Europe. And it was also called the capital of polymers, because this is what actually an industrial park for production of fibers and related chemicals. It was also another base for industry of iron smelting and laminating, and also for aluminium. So it was extremely polluting, and it was polluting before any kind of environmental law in Italy. The first comprehensive environmental law, it was in 1997, and the second revision was in 2006. So the point is that after the 70s, after the first half of the 80s, the chemical world changed, and also the cost for energy in Italy was, and it is, one of the highest in the world. So many companies left the park, and the park was almost completely abandoned, and we had a huge problem. Over-contaminated site, with no economy, no money to do environmental restoration, and a very, very delicate environment. So what to do in this urban area, and what to do to restore the environment, and what to do to actually attract investment in this area. And the main problem related to sponge cities, which is a problem for us also, of course, is that when you face the problem of how to deal with the soil remediation, and this is a very simplified conceptual model. You can see the factories on top, you can see the different layers, so the soil, the subsoil. On the bottom, you also have the impervious layer and the groundwater that is accumulating over the impervious layer. The problem is that the first thing that you have to do to stop the flow of contamination that runs with the water, the problem is that during time, the contamination comes down to the soil, to the subsoil, and when it encounters the water, that's the real problem, because the water transports the contamination in other places. So it is not only a polluted area, but it is also a polluting area. So you have to stop the flow. You have to stop the flow, putting down the walls attached to the impervious layer, and in this way you stop the flow of the water. And of course, this is a safety measure because in this way you stop the pollution to spread, but at the same time you have a huge problem with water management, because the problem is that on one side you have very important improvement about the surface water, and you can see here two pictures about before and after the intervention of the safety measure, and you can see how the natural color of the water has been restored after the works, and you can also see the pie walls that have been established between the ground and the water. But also you have problem related to, for example, flooding and rainwater. In 2006-07, we had a major flooding on the main line, and this is Venice usually is famous for the high water, and high water is when you have the flooding of the ancient city. But that is not related to rainwater, or it is related to strong wind blowing from the south and pushing the sea inside the lagoon. So it affects the lagoon, it affects the ancient city, but it never affects the mainland. In this situation, in 2007, we had a major flooding. It was 300 millimeters of rain in a couple of hours. And the main problem is that the water was not flowing away. So we had the flooding in the mainland. So we understood that we had to do something very quickly. And the point is that we have to take the water, and we decided to do an integrated system to deal with different issues at the same time. How to deal with the contaminated underground water, how to deal with the effluents and the wastewater of the factories, and how to deal with the stormwater and the rainwater. So the first stage was to establish the backbone of a pipeline to take the water from the factories and to take the water from the contaminated underground and to take the rainfall water. And we brought that to an integrated wastewater treatment plant. And the point is that this plant is also designed to clean the water and reuse the water. We pump back the water to the factories, for example, for cooling systems, but also for industrial processes. So the point is that in this way, we loop the water and we don't take any more fresh water from the environment for industrial uses. But at the same time, we can regulate the flow of the water inside the industrial park, and that affects also positively the whole urban area. This system, it was not easy to understand how to do the system, how to do the economics of the systems, how to do the financial of the system. Point is that it took a lot of time, a lot of negotiations, but the point is that now it is working. It is a treatment facility of 160,000 cubic meters per day, and more than 1/3 is related to municipal wastewater, and the remaining part is industrial wastewater and rainwater. It took an investment of almost 200 million euros, and it is a private-public partnership. The investment capital is fully private, with public warranties of minimum turnover per each year. But actually, the annual turnover is around 22 million euros. The operating costs are 19 million euros. So it has its own sustainability, economical sustainability. And the point is that all the factories deliver. Yes, of course. All the factories have to deliver the effluent as is. They don't have to do pretreatment because everything is dealt inside the treatment plant. This is also very important for the factories because in this way they pay less for environmental protection. Here you can see the picture of the industrial park with the backbone for the sewerage system. And this is the backbone that brings back the clean water to the factories. On the left side, you can see also the finishing section of the treatment plant. It is a very large constructed wetland. It is meant to do not only the finishing of the water, but also balancing the quality of the water in the lagoon. So after that, you can actually deal with the soil remediation, and this is okay, all the planning of the city with each section of and each loft of the area. We know everything that is happening from the detailed surveilling to the actual works for the remediation. And these are the pictures of some of the works. So this is for the experience of Venice. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Simone. I could imagine that you could have given us a presentation lasting for quite a long time with such a huge area to be covered. Thanks for this presentation, which gave us the dimensions of scale of areas and also the dimensions of when climate change adaptation has to be taken into account or actually get remediation problems solved in advance as such. We will move on to our next speaker, Karina Almeida. Are you ready? Excellent, Karina. Thank you.
Carina, we can't hear you. Kan je haar microfoon?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you now.
I have to change my micro. Sorry for that.
Okay.
My name is Karina Almeida. I came from Aqualogos company. Aqualogos is the Portuguese engineering consultancy firm since '96, with experience in water resources and environment in Portugal and in more than 20 countries around the world. Hope in the near future China will be at this our map in a blue color. So the company embraces many different fields of activity, has water supply and wastewater systems, environmental assessment and monitoring, construction management and supervision, or research, innovation and development. So focus on the problem and the needs. It is well known that we will face extreme weather events, especially in the urban areas and with the rapid urban growth. So this led to an overuse of natural resources, creating environmental degradation. So our cities need to be designed with a more sustainable, efficient, adaptive and resilient approach. So this can only be done adopting an holistic planning and management, as all of you already know. And it's ideally, we should plan this first sitting in our computers, because in our days we all have know-how and all this development in terms of the technological tools. That's why we are here today, talking with each other and all around the world. So taking the approach of this last statement in terms of the holistic planning and management, Aqualogos developed several projects that integrate a vast of variables and actors of the water cycle. So Aqualogos focus on the solutions for the development of complex technological platforms, which could integrate different software systems, different types of available information, and the ability to simulate climate conditions in short and long terms, and present, past, and future climate conditions, flooded areas, water quality and quantity, soil infiltration. This is extremely important when we talk about the sponge capability of our cities. Coastal areas, among others. So mainly the possibility to simulate and test the impacts of urban activities, the climates, and land use or the soil changes. So I'll present you here the H2 Porto platform. This platform was a result of a joint venture led by Aqualogos, focused on the monitoring and control of the urban water cycle, and integrates all information in order to anticipate floods, pollution events, etc. using mainly the numerical modeling approach. So it integrates several type of models to simulate all the urban water cycle in the Porto city. Here it's some example of the screens that we can see in the H2 Porto platform. Here in the upper right image, we can see an example of the water balance for the water supply in the city. Then here we have the water balance for the wastewater supply system. So here in the Porto in January, this is the water balance in the monthly basis. We can see that 100% of the water from the wastewater system was treated. And then here we can see the water flow in the water supply system. So the colors in green and red, it's related to the water flow values instantly measured. So other components is related to water quality in the wastewater and supply system, and as well in the long coasts area in the Porto city. This has long coasts with several beaches here that the population used usually during the summer. So in these images, this show the weather forecast, for instance, for the next 5 days. The currents here and the E. coli concentration for the coastal area, and as well the discharges of the water quality parameters for each river basins that are included in the Porto city. That is an extreme complex city. This is just to show you other example of the technological platform. This is the Omg Platform. This platform it's still in developing with a joint venture with a higher level of research. So we have universities and all the stakeholders, including here in this development of this platform. This integrates different types of information, such as water storage of several reservoirs, weather forecasts, meteorological data from all the stations, river flow forecasts, river and reservoirs, water quality, flood areas, or even information from the satellite images, such as the water levels from the reservoirs, or even the NDVI index from the vegetation. So this platform can be applied as in several basin watersheds or at local scales. So to concluding this short presentation, Aqualogos aim to apply unique tools for integrated water cycle management, moving from reactive to a proactive management, especially due to climate change projections. So we aim to simplify the access of different modeling results in order to adapt cities and increase our resilience. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karina. I have just a quick question, which will also be bridging to the presentation of Chris in a short while. You really use a data-based approach to find the right solutions, and I can imagine that would be, on one hand, give much more precise assessments and also precise solutions. But it will probably also be more costly in the construction side. Have you got any assessments of how does your data-based approach favor a better operational and true cost of ownership profile in the long run?
The database approach, sorry, I didn't understand.
The fact that you are spending so much data and such a comprehensive effort in your preparations must give you a better true cost of ownership profile.
Yeah, the idea is to well, we cannot work alone. So usually we work and we develop this kind of platforms with other, especially with the stakeholders and all the water users and water managers. So usually they have already the data already usable. So we try to adapt as fast as we can to adapt that kind of data to our platforms. And usually it's not so time expensive. So
Okay. Thank you very much, Karina. And without further ado, we will move on to the last of the presentations, which is Chris Sevenbergen from IHH Delft. Chris, please.
Okay. Thank you, Hendrik. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my presentation is about sustainable financing mechanisms, and it has been mentioned several times today that financing is a barrier to get the water sensitive cities and the sponge cities really implemented. And what I would like to focus on today is the public-private financing, which is a very important way to attract funding and resources. For instance, in China, by 2030, 80% of the urban areas have to comply with the sponge city guidelines, and that means a huge effort. A lot of investments will be required, and the same holds true for Europe. Europe has set very ambitious targets in the coming 10 years to transform our cities into climate resilient cities, water sensitive cities. So the investments required are immense. But let's have a look at the paradigm shift we see in the landscape of infrastructure financing. And it has been mentioned by several speakers, also by Henrik, and we see a change in that landscape. And for instance, what we see is that we want to move away from economic efficiency, which has led to the gray infrastructural systems and has a very clear targets and clear guidelines and norms, towards a new paradigm where we want to look into the opportunities and to unlock the economic potentials which are there. So that's all about multiple benefits and to expand those benefits of our measures as much as possible. So that paradigm shift is occurring, and that leads, if we look at the bottom of this slide, that leads also to open the door to private investors, that we want to shift from public finance to public and private finance, and the reason is, of course, that we need private finance to fill the financing gaps. Now that is I think very important, and what I would like to show in my brief presentation, that green infrastructure or blue-green infrastructure or nature-based solutions are offering this opportunity to involve the private sector. So what is public-private partnerships? Why are we inclined to have those? One is that they make projects affordable. Private financing is important and is needed. It also will help to achieve better value for money over the lifetime of the project. We will adopt and include the private sector experience and knowledge into our projects. And last but not least, it will also better utilize, say, the social and economic benefits of our assets. Now, let's see how that will work in practice. Now, in China, we have the public-private markets already there, as well as in Europe. And this slide gives a bit of flavor of the volumes of projects we see, and these are already significant. But when we look into the sponge city projects in particular, we see that public-private finance is really lagging behind. There are a few examples, but they are very minor. And I will come back to that within a minute. Now, what is public-private finance? Public-private finance has a few features, but maybe the two most important ones, and these are highlighted in that frame, at public-private finance are agreements between the government and the private sector, and it is merely about infrastructure. It's about community facilities and related services. So that also means that Spont City projects are ideal settings for public-private partners, in theory. Now, the need for public-private partnerships in Spont City program implementation is there. As I mentioned, there is a huge investment gap. It has been mentioned by Mr. Chen this morning, also from CEWP, that financing Spont City is important. Therefore, public and private finances will be there. But it is more than only attracting additional resources. It's also improving the quality of infrastructure. It is also bringing innovation into those processes. And these innovations are also about green infrastructure. And why are these innovations so important? These are important because we are lacking a lot of, and as Frans van der Ven already mentioned, a lot of, you can say, knowledge and understanding and clear guidance how to implement green infrastructure. Now, the private sector is well placed to give a hand there. Now, green infrastructure, as we concluded in our LOF 3 CECOS project, reduces gray infrastructure requirements. So green infrastructure can be used to blend the existing gray systems. So it's not replacing, but it is blending and it's adding, say, qualities to the existing systems. But also it adds qualities in terms of additional benefits, as we mentioned by previous speakers several times. And it also enhances the redundancy of the systems, and that is the resiliency of the system. So green infrastructure has three functions as indicated in this slide. Now we see a lot of examples, more and more. This is a typical constructed wetland. You see them in many places in China. And of course, they are to purify water, to store excessive rainfall, but they do much more than that, as mentioned several times, but they also lead to the increased value of the properties close to those constructed wetlands. And the question is, of course, who is benefiting from these investments into green infrastructure and who is paying? And you see there's a discrepancy over there that those who are benefiting are not paying. Another important function of green infrastructure are those urban floodplains. They are also more and more being installed. And again, the private investments in these areas are, as we see so far, quite limited, although the benefits from these investments are quite significant also for those who are in the private sector. Now,
One minute, Chris.
Yes, please. This is an example of Kunshan City, where we see urban agriculture as a way to implement green cities and Spont City concepts. And these urban agriculture systems, they are managed by private companies, and the citizens are using those systems. Now, this is an example of New York, where we see that a green infrastructure and blending gray systems will lead to a significant reduce of the cost. What you can see here, the 2.9 billion euros is the investments in the gray systems. And when we want to expand the capacity, which is needed in New York, then there are two options. Either we expand using gray systems, or we are expanding using green systems. And what was the result of this cost-benefit analysis? That those green systems are really less expensive than the gray system. And this offers an opportunity for the private sector to involve, and that is what New York is currently doing. Now, what we did in our CECOS project, we asked our cities, Beijing, Turku, Gothenburg, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, to give a scoring on what is their experience with public-private financing. And what came out of this interviews of this scoring is that our cities, they have limited experience in public-private partnerships. They see that it is gaining ground, and they see also that they have an increasing ability, but are not there yet, to value green infrastructure, which is considered as a critical factor in public-private finance. Now, what are the lessons we can see so far from the projects in Europe, but also in China? That we need, of course, to develop a business case with a very compelling story where we have to capture the benefits, also the benefits, the softer benefits, and that is, of course, a challenge. And in order to do so, we need to engage the stakeholders, as mentioned several times. We have to align those interests, and we have to identify those interests. But what is also important, that we also see that there are other, as we speak, policy domains which are emerging, like health and biodiversity. Now, these domains should be connected to what we call as Spawn City. So the Spawn City objectives need to be expanded and need to be more comprehensive than strictly focusing on the water system. And finally, there is also an opportunity to link carbon neutrality and mobility, which are emerging themes as well, to nature-based solutions. So there are a lot of, I would say, opportunities. Now, to conclude, we can say that public-private partnerships are gaining ground and are also really needed. Green infrastructure is offering that opportunity. It creates additional benefits, and we have to, of course, value those benefits, which is not easy, but we are making progress. We need to consider the long-term life cycle benefits and synergies of those systems, and therefore we need to include stakeholders in that process. Now, that is what I would like to say, Hendrik, about the innovative financing mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Again, a comprehensive presentation where much more time could have been spent. While we are now preparing for our roundtable, and we will have 2 short roundtables, I will, for the first one, invite Mads Terkelsen and Frans van de Veen and Chen-Li Chun and Sergio Correa to join me for this roundtable. So please open your videos and your microphones. Excellent, thanks a lot. For this first roundtable, I would invite for a short discussion about the solutions. We have seen several cases here during these presentations, but I would like to invite you to anyhow reflect a bit solutions at hand for adaptation, and for adaptation which takes into account the relevant neighboring topics which is also influenced by these with the water management. Do we have the sufficient solutions, and do we particularly have them in ways where this means that we can scale up to all cities in a rather rapid manner without being very costly, and, sorry to ask you this way, not to have too much need of consultants and so on, but something which can be implemented rather quickly? We are seeing increasing urbanization. We are talking about countries beyond China, beyond Europe, and so on. So what is your reflection on this? Frans, will you start? And please, short answers.
Yes, thank you, Hendrik. I think you're bringing up a couple of very important issues. Well, the solutions I think we have at hand. What is necessary is they need to be customized to the local conditions. And that is where our challenge is. Customization to the local conditions is step one, and in order to do so, I think to scale up rapidly, it's important to roll out sort of a training program to city learning to accelerate this learning process, because it is not only about implementing the solutions, it's also about maintenance of the solutions. I think we have to emphasize that more and more, that construction is one, the maintenance is the other. I think these are important considerations. Another point that I want to make is say data sharing in the organizations that we are dealing with. It's a multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary problem we are solving. So cooperation between these siloed organizations is extremely important.
Thank you, Franz. Sergio, welcome to the roundtable and to the webinar. You're also representing Aqualogos from Portugal.
Yes.
Please let me hear your reflections on the solutions we have at hand and the possibility to scale up.
Thank you very much. So I'm from Aqualogos, and my colleague Karina has made our presentation. I think one very important thing regarding the planning of these smart cities is it's more difficult to take the city smart when the cities are already developed, and should be very important that for the new cities or the small cities that want to be big cities, to start planning and to start thinking of these systems of in order to turn the cities more livable in the early stages of planning. We have tried these kind of water management platforms in different cities, and we think that is more easy for the planning, and also for the cities, and also for the implementing this kind of systems in a city that is not already planned. So it's more easy to have all the data for use this kind of water platforms. In fact, in the case of Porto City that we have done this system, was not easy because a lot of data was not available. Of course, the city have some investment to get to implement some measurement equipment for this to make available to make the platform usable. And so I think this kind of platforms will be more useful for new cities.
Thank you, Sergio. Chen Li Chun. We hear from several of the presentations and also the two comments here. Data is key to sponge cities management, but data access, data sharing, and siloed organizations are problems. What are your reflections on getting the data, but at the same time also having to get the organizations ready to actually sharing data and avoiding silos?
这样就是我谈自己的看法，就是关于这个水管理这一块的一些内容。然后呢，首先呢，就是在中国从这个城镇化进程来说，从改革开放以后啊，这个进程是比较快的。快了之后呢，就会出现一系列的涉水的一些问题。那么这样一来呢，就是说目前呢，就为了解决这个问题呢，中国其实政府层面呢，其实做了大量的工作，其实包括在2014年开始的海绵城市建设，其实这是一个很大的努力。那么所以说，在这个层面呢，就是说， 关于有没有解决方案这一块，其实对于内涝海绵城市建设这一块试水的有没有方案，通过国家30个试点城市呢，基本上可以说是有一定的方案。就比方说不同的城市，中国南方、北方、东部、西部，还有经济发达地区、经济不发达地区，都可以提出它相对应的那个解决方案。这里面就涉及到您第2个问题，能不能快速推广的问题。从我个人的判断啊，就是说，这也刚才您特意问我的一个问题，就是数据孤岛的问题。这个确实很现实的问题，就是海绵城市建设的一个很大的那个困境在于管网的问题。那么管网的问题呢，其实这一块呢，这个反正也说一句那个客观的话，就是很多城市呢可能没有地下管网的数据，尤其是小城市，这个我们也不否认，因为这个我也去小城市调研过，就是说它对于地下管网是一个什么样的情况，可能目前为止，别说孤岛的事，可能能数据库都没有，就不存在一个那个，就是说没有，可能那有的数据更多是存在于管理人员的那个脑海中，他可能部分的管理人员有这个。另外一个就是说，可能有的地级市以上的城市会有数据库，但这个数据库呢，可能是几年以前，或是比方说5年以前做的数据普查。那么其实从管网的角度来说，数据的普查这一块，更多的是普查管网有没有，但对于管网里面是什么样的状况，比方说它的那个有没有损坏，有没有淤堵，这些东西可能都不太清楚。所以这样的话，就是说，对于数据，一个是有没有，第2个有的质量怎么样，其实会对整个那个我们的工作其实有一定的影响。那么再回到那个，就是说国家其实想怎么干这个事儿，就是反正我多说2句哈，就是在“十四五”里面呢，就是“十四五”的规划纲要里面有很明确的一句，就是说“十四五”的国家的内涝治理要见到很明显的成效。那么见到很明显的成效了，在那个这里面就有一条，就是说要加大中央的投入这一块。这一块投入了，其实国家可能很快会推广，就是说加大中央政府的资金投入。加大中央政府资金投入啊，这里面其实我想回到刚才听到那个 Chris 那个先生讲的，就是说这个 PPP 合作，PPP 合作这一块呢，确实在排水防涝这一块呢是没有那个一般没有那个就是说稳定的现金流。那么对于这种情况，其实更多是采取政府买单的情况。那么其实在中国的那个目前的 PPP 的那个中国有相关的法律，有一条规定，其中有一条就是说有一个金额限制，在20亿以下和20亿以下，这是2个不同的那个标准。20亿以上呢，基本上是要求那个要有稳定的现金流。那么对于20亿以下的，可能更多是采用政府买单。那么我想就请问一下，目前就是我们在财政这一块，目前跟国内合作的 PPP 有没有相关的比较成熟的案例？比方在市政公用，在排水防涝这个行业里面，因为这个确实可能对于下一阶段能解决快速的推进这个排水防涝设施建设这一块，可能会有很重要的参考意义。一方面是技术方面确实我们已经有海绵城市的示范。再一个，我们也在和咱们中俄水平台合作，已经也取得了比较好的成效。那么在资金方面呢，我想可能就是看看您这一块有没有相关的比较成熟的案例，因为就这个实操性比较强，好吧？
Thank you very much, Chandy Chun. I think this is a topic we should discuss further, how we can set up a separate discussion about that one. For now, I would like to just turn to Mads Terkelsen and follow up on your mentioning of projects in Ghana. A question which also resembles the comment from Chandy Chun about when we move to smaller cities in remote areas, we don't have data. So what is our value proposition to cities without data? How can we move into adaptation? What are our opportunities for making this simple but still achieving results?
Good question. It's also actually relates to your first question, if we have the technologies to do all of this, and I might not agree on that, because in at least in Denmark, when we set up a problem, we set up a solution to urban blue-green development, we do not have this issue with heavy pollution. We often do that in other parts of the world, and also including China. And I think the solution there is because of the lack of data, we cannot point out the sources, pollution sources. That's just not possible. So one of the key solutions, at least in Denmark, would be to remove the sources to clean the water environment, but we cannot do that elsewhere. So there is actually a need for remediation methods or mitigation methods that can be installed in, for example, rivers, lakes, streams, and to clean the water, the polluted water that comes from upstream. So those are one of those solutions that you can apply if you don't have the data available for removing the sources. And I think that's some sort of an important thing you need to solve. Of course, also maybe look at, maybe not go for 100% clean environment, but maybe 80%, because it's looking at cost efficiency. Some areas it's much too costly to go 100%. Yeah, that's sort of my thoughts on that. To try to apply methods that can take care of the sort of inflow into the area that you work with, instead of going out and removing the sources. And it's the pollution is a very important part when you do blue-green urban development. You don't want to have pollution. Polluted water in the area.
Thank you, Mads. I will move on to Gerard de Vries, who has been responsible for the China-Europe cooperation on urban water and sponge cities. And Gerard, listening to all the presentations and people pointing to constraints regarding data, regarding knowledge about where are the upstream pollution sources, experiences on more sharing of experiences about PPPs and financing. What are your reflections on what would be for future the next step cooperation China and Europe on developing solutions and implementation models?
Yes, thank you, Henrik. Well, I think that we had a high quality of presentations today. And I think that we made a good analysis of where we are in Europe and in China. We could state that we moved from, you might say, the traditional concept of sponge cities, just capturing the average rainfall in a year, from taking into account also the extreme weather events. And besides that, talking about resilience, I think it's also very important that we not only put changing weather, changing climate into the equation, but also subsidence. What we see all over the world, that subsidence is a real big problem. In the Western world, we have a 2 to 5 millimeters subsidence in the coastal zone every year. In China, it is even 5 to 10 millimeters on an average, on an annual basis for the last 20 years. And so that means that subsidence is
a very important issue to cover. And you might say it is bigger than the effect of sea level rise. So that is something that we really have to take on board. I think that we should also make further steps in what we call co-creation, how to bring, you might say, all the stakeholders on board and take all the issues at the table. One of our next webinars from the CCOSC series of webinars will be the webinar on co-creation and finance. And those will be the two main discussions that we will have on the policy dialogue between China and Europe on the implementation of spawn cities. The biggest question with the financing is how to make it sustainable. The investment, yes, that's something that we can overcome, but how to make it sustainable and how to bring it in a scheme where we could also cover the operational costs. Because we have to say that the spawn city elements, they are more or less, you might say, critical elements in our whole flood protection systems. So we should bring them, you might say, in a type of register where we see, okay, that is like we do with dikes, like we do with other infrastructure, and say this is the critical infrastructure and we need to maintain that and register it, check it, and operate it in a professional way. As for the green, blue infrastructures, as Chris said, we know the benefits, but how to make the people that benefit from those structures, make them, you might say, pay for the service they get. If we can turn those structures into a type of water service, then we have, you might say, the money circulating for a sustainable operation and maintenance. Thank you.
Excellent, Gary. I think that's a good one to end your your very valuable contribution. How to make those who benefits pay. How to make a healthy economic circle, paying on that those get the services, pay for the value. I'll invite the participants of our very brief roundtable to give a very brief comment on what is your takeaway here. We have to conclude in a few minutes, but I would just like to hear from Franz and Sergio and Chen very briefly, what has been your takeaway from today's webinar? Franz first.
Oh, thank you, Henrik. My takeaway is first of all, we are on the same track. It seems like we are gradually moving towards a sort of a similar language and a similar approach. One is called Spawn City, the other one is called water sensitive urban development, etc. For good reasons, I think Gerard added some components to that. The word subsidence was not mentioned earlier in this webinar, I think. Thank you, Gerard, for bringing that up, because I think it's really important to include that. So we have to define that worldwide approach to bring to a more resilient city, not only a spawn city, but a resilient city. Not only resilient for climate change, but resilient for all sorts of shocks, economic and social shocks as well.
Converging towards the same complexity, handling difficult matters in a simple way. Sergio, what is your takeaway?
Thank you. I think the main takeaway from this webinar is that we have all the tools, and I think our cities deserves the improvement that we can able to do it, and I think I think we have all the conditions to improve the quality of the life of the people in our cities. I think this is the main issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chen Li-chun, what has been your takeaway from today's webinar?
感谢主持人哈，就是说今天我们探讨之后，就是说我们感觉我们有一个共同的理想，就是说都是为了这个良好的可持续的城市的水管理。那么在中国和欧洲呢，也有不同的，也有存在一些差异，就是说它由于气候特征导致的，就是说两个地区呢，在应对可持续管理的时候会采取不同的方案。但是我想呢，也恰恰是这个不同，就为中国、为欧洲它的可持续水管理啊，可以提出不同的那个可以解决问题的措施。那么这个措施呢，不管是对中国来说，还是对那个欧洲来说，都是有借鉴的。这样也正是这个中央水平台这个项目的意义所在。好吧。
Thank you very much, Chen Li-chun. We are a few things away from being able to close for today. I will invite Liam Jia from the USME Center to say a few words about the services of the USME Center. I'll invite Edita Hogenberg Dirksen to say a few words about the upcoming Aquatech Shanghai event. And I will invite all of you to join our next webinar, which is on March 30th. You should from the hopefully have received information about it. Otherwise, please visit the website of CEWP. And please also, again, if you haven't done it, please register so we can I can send you the feedback questionnaires. Liam Jia, the EUSME Center, very briefly, what can you offer to the companies?
Thank you, Henrik. If I may also just quickly share my screen. We did prepare a few slides, but since we are running a little bit behind time, I will run the slides very quickly and very briefly to introduce a little bit of who we are, the role we play in the entire picture, and how we can support the relevant players. The USME Center, we are a European funded project, started already in 2010, over 10 years ago. In China, we are, the majority of us are based in China. We provide a comprehensive range of services to European SMEs to facilitate them to enter the Chinese markets. In a nutshell, the services we offer includes a knowledge center where we have published comprehensive range of market reports, guidelines, and case studies. We provide first-line advice to European SMEs covering almost all sectors. We provide trainings, both online and offline, to companies. And we also have an advocacy platform where we constantly voice on behalf of European SMEs to improve constantly the business environment for European SMEs in China. And all our services are free of charge for European SMEs. On this slide, we're listed here a few of the content we have developed in the environment sector, including, of course, one of the highlights is in 2020, last year, we published for CEWP a market report on industrial wastewater policy overview and opportunities for two of the regions in China, namely Sichuan and Shandong province. In terms of the services we provide to SMEs, to European companies, in terms of market access, it's all listed here as well. We provide, first of all, a market overview. We present the opportunities. We also will present up-to-date policies and how these policies are implemented. and the outlook, because in China the policies changes at a very rapid speed. We also then introduce the market access barriers and the potential limitations. Because of the fact that we are based in China, we also take the advantage of being connected to various key stakeholders in the sector. That includes government oversight, but also includes local design institutes and industry parks. Lastly, we also provide this advocacy work towards a better business environment for European SMEs in China. And eventually we work on the good purpose to facilitate to match the solution holders with the challenge owners in China. As Henrik has introduced, we are going to collaborate with the China-Europe Water Platform in a series of activities, including 4 webinar sessions. And eventually, we are also in discussion of having a booth participation at Aquatech in Shanghai later this year in June, where we potentially are going to collect interest from European companies, exhibitors who are willing to participate, however limited to the travel restrictions that are now taking place. That is in very short who we are, what we do, how we can support. I noticed that from our panelists today and also from the participants, there are a lot of companies who are already in China, but for some of the companies that are still looking into entering the market, you are more than welcome to contact us, and we are happy to offer our support. And that is it.
Thank you very much, Liam. Editor, upcoming Aquatech Shanghai.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon from Amsterdam. I'm Edita Hogenberg, the event director of Aquatech China, Mexico, and Amsterdam. It was really interesting to join this webinar to hear more about the challenges in water, like data, but also the multi-stakeholder approach, because that's also well, these topics we also want to address for Aquatech, not only for China, but also for our online platform and in Amsterdam and Mexico as well. So we are really pleased that we are involved of this series of webinars in cooperation with the CEWP. We will continue this valuable conversation at Aquatech China in June, because together with CEWP, we will host a seminar live at Aquatech China. So for the ones who are in China, you're of course welcome to join and to take it to the next level. Well, I like to stay connected with you to talk more about water challenges. So please, if you have any topics or cases that you would like to highlight at Aquatech, then please reach out to me. And of course, I hope to meet you all in person, either in China or Amsterdam or in Mexico. But one thing, last but not least, a big thank you to you, Henrik. I think you are an excellent chairman for this first webinar. So thank you for bringing this expertise together with us. So thank you. See you next time.
Thank you, Editor, and thanks for your nice words. That's quite good because you have to deal with me. I will be facilitating the next ones, and hope we'll see all of you again on March 30th. Find information at the website. Go to the chat for finding the information. Be aware of the 3 small dots. You can save the chat if you don't want to take notes. Thanks to all the speakers. Thanks to the interpreters. You've done a fantastic job, and so on. Please, everybody, see you again on March 30th, and have a nice day. All presentations should be, hopefully, they will be available at the CEWP website within a very few days. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.